If you follow sports, you know that a generational talent comes along very rarely, once every 20 years or so. When this happens, it is usually one of the most exciting times to be a fan because everyone loves truly great players. In the early 2000s, the hockey world was bracing itself for the newest young prodigy coming onto the scene at the time. His name was Sidney Crosby. There was more hype around him as a teenager coming to the league than perhaps any player in NHL history. The question on everybody's mind back then was, will Sidney Crosby live up to the hype and become the greatest player of his generation? Now, 20 years later, I am here to answer that question, and the answer is yes. Sidney Crosby is the best hockey player of his generation. I will prove this in three ways. First, I will discuss Crosby's longevity. Then, I will discuss how complete a player he is and how he dominates in all phases of the game of hockey and has no weaknesses. And lastly, I will discuss his track record of winning championships more than other players. I am qualified to speak about this topic because I have played hockey since I was a kid and know a lot about the game, and I have also been following Crosby's career since he entered the league back in 2006. I think it is very important for everyone to know that Crosby is the best player of his generation because he has dedicated his entire life to hockey, and it would be unfair and sad to see him not being appreciated for what he has worked so hard to accomplish. First thing I want to talk about is Crosby's longevity, because there is simply nobody in NHL history who has been an elite player for as long as Crosby. Crosby's first year in the NHL was back in 2006, when he was only 18 years old. That year, he was the sixth leading scorer in the entire NHL. This is incredibly impressive, as almost nobody is even able to play in the NHL at 18 years old, let alone be one of the best players in the league. His second season, at age 19, he became the best player in the league. He won the NHL's MVP award, the youngest player ever to win it, and led the NHL in scoring with 120 points in 82 games. At age 19, this made him the youngest scoring champion in not just in NHL history, but in all of the major sports. That was back in 2007. Fast forward to 2023, and the now 36-year-old Crosby is still one of the best players in the NHL, 18 years after he entered the league. In fact, the National Hockey League Players Association, a Carsworthy source, did a poll amongst all current NHL players and asked them, in a must-win game, which forward in the NHL do you think would be the most impactful? Crosby came in second place in the poll at the age of 36, which shows that he's one of the best players in the league still. He may not be the best player in the world anymore, but he was until fairly recently. In 2017, industry expert Wayne Gretzky, the all-time leading scorer in NHL history, was talking about Crosby and said, he's the best player in the game today. Gretzky is clearly an expert on hockey, so this is not an appeal to misplaced authority fallacy. That was back in 2017, and to be the best player in the NHL for at least 10 years, from 2007 when he won his first MVP award until 2017, shows the incredible longevity that Crosby has demonstrated over his career. The next point that I want to make is that Crosby is the most complete player of his generation and maybe of all time. He excels in every aspect of the game and has no weaknesses. Offensively, he is phenomenal. He has led the league in both goals and assists multiple times each. He is also an incredibly good defensive player. The Selke Trophy is given out every year to the best defensive forward in the league, and Crosby has finished in the top 15 in voting for that award 7 different times and was 4th in voting for that award in 2019. He is also very good at face-offs. According to NHL.com, another Carsworthy source, he has won more than 50% of his face-offs in every single season he has played except for one. Crosby is also considered one of the best leaders in all of hockey. In 2008, at the age of 20, he became the youngest team captain in NHL history and has been the captain of the Pittsburgh Penguins every single year since then, 17 years in a row. The completeness of Crosby's game is really what separates him from everyone else. I will concede that he is not the greatest goal scorer of his generation. That title belongs to Alex Ovechkin, who has scored more goals than Crosby over their careers. However, Ovechkin is not nearly as good of a player as Crosby is because he lacks other aspects of his game, such as defense and passing ability, both of which Crosby excels at. In other words, Crosby is a more complete player, and that makes him better. The final and most important point I would like to make is that Sidney Crosby's game results in his team winning more than any other player. And that is the most important thing in sports, because how great can you be as a player if your team doesn't win? Sidney Crosby has won the Stanley Cup 3 times, which is a record for 21st century players. During 2 of those Stanley Cup winning runs, he was named playoff MVP. He has also won 2 Olympic gold medals, and he won the World Cup of Hockey in 2016. In the 2010 Olympics, he scored what's known as the Golden Goal, which was an overtime winning goal, which won the gold medal for Canada. I have a book here titled Hockey's Greatest Game-Winning Goals, and Crosby's Golden Goal has a whole page dedicated to it. There's a picture of Crosby and the golden goal he scored, and it discusses that goal and how it won in overtime won the Olympics for Team Canada, which is really, really a big deal. This is a testament to how great of a player Crosby is. His winning record is a big reason why he's considered the greatest player of his generation. And I have another book, which Sports Illustrated created, called Hockey's Greatest, where they rank the greatest players in NHL history. And Crosby, they have him ranked 6th here. Number 6 of all time. 6th greatest player ever. And everyone rated above him played in the 90s, so they were from previous generation. Played in the 90s or earlier. So he is 6th of all time according to that book, but he is the best of his generation. And that book cites the championships that Crosby won as being a big reason why he was so great and why he's ranked so highly. Now, some people would probably argue that winning is a team accomplishment, and so that doesn't prove Crosby's individual greatness. However, this is not the case. Great players propel their teams to wins, and great leaders make everyone around them better. The fact that Crosby's teams keep winning with him is no coincidence and proves how good he is at the sport of hockey. In conclusion, to answer the question, is Sidney Crosby the greatest hockey player of his generation? His longevity, the completeness of his game, and his championship track record that I talked about prove that, yes, Sidney Crosby is the greatest player of his generation. 20 years ago when he burst on the scene, everyone was talking about him as a can't-miss prospect. Now, we have a new supposed can't-miss prospect who is currently in his rookie season in the NHL. His name is Connor Bedard, and Crosby was his favorite player growing up. Now, we will see if he can live up to the hype and become the best player of his generation, as Crosby did for his generation. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this speech.